Morning.
Hey everybody, how is it going?
Everything's good. How are you?
Okay. Um, it is I have to say that every year, December 24th, um, it feels like Erev Rosh Hashanah or Erev Yom Kippur. In that, everybody's rushing to get everything done, and then there's a calm, right? Then it's quiet the next day because everything has to be done beforehand.
Which I look forward to.
Yeah, and it's great. I don't quite understand the rush seems to have gone on all month. That part I don't quite get. I mean, maybe it's sort of like Pesach, but even Pesach preparations don't take a month for me. So,
Well, this year there's 1 week less between Thanksgiving and Christmas than normal. Thanksgiving came
Oh,
late at the end of the
Oh,
month.
that's right.
So instead of like 5 weeks to shop, people have
uh-huh.
four.
Ah,
okay. No,
big friends. Yeah.
I was at
I,
Trader Joe's like 10 days ago and it was on a Tuesday and it was so crowded. And I said, why is it,
Every
they're
time I
giving
go,
it Goodwill Christmas. And I was like,
every
okay.
time I go to Trader Joe's, it is incredibly
I
packed.
mean, I I don't know.
but by the way, the Trader Joe's like they purposely build their stores and their parking lots. I mean, I know that the Trader Joe's here or in Knoxville is like shares a parking lot with a bunch of other stores. But like, if you ever go to a standalone Trader Joe's, they purposely make small parking lots to give the impression of scarcity.
Mhm.
Oh, they do a good job of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, but the nice thing is that once you get in there, the people there are so incredibly
Oh,
nice
they're
that
so
it's like,
nice. It was
Right.
so
yeah, it's
crowded.
like it's like oh yeah, that's why I wanted to come here.
Yeah, I got to show my socks to the girl at the checkout counter who realized I was Jewish and got all excited.
Oh, I mean,
mean,
well,
you know,
they're oh yeah, they know they I mean, no, they love all things.
she was Jewish too, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so a good old Trader Joseph's.
Nice.
Um, so anyway, I so it'll be an exciting, and of course I have to go to the grocery store today myself. So wish me luck. Uh,
I'm not leaving the house today.
fair enough. Fair enough. No, and it's all good, and it was a nice reminder. I mean, yesterday, my kids and we went to a firehouse, the local fire station, and brought them food, and it's like
Oh,
yeah, that's why. It's
that's
like
nice.
it's like yeah, like this is I like the idea of this idea of okay, we're going to do something. We're going to remember other people. We're going to be nice to other people. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
let's let's keep that in mind.
and people definitely are nice. I mean, they can't get me a shopping cart fast enough or hold the door open for me fast enough. And everybody says Merry Christmas, and I just smile.
Yeah, yeah,
I say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like it's okay. Have like
That's
enjoy
what
your
they're
Christmas.
celebrating.
Yeah, it's all good.
It definitely makes most people be nicer than during the rest of the year. So,
Right. Okay. Well, let's do some studying. I figure, it's now, by the way, we are not I'm not doing a class next week. Gonna take the week I'm gonna take the week off for the end of the year, but then we'll be back in first full week of January. So here we go. Let's see. Yes, we needed, I know Safari needs their donations. I get it. Okay. No, not. What did I just do? Okay. Okay, this is what I need. Okay, try that again. Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim. I think we is it 107. Oh yeah. This is when we were forgetting whether or not we prayed. That was fun. Okay. And we're talking about like innovations. Um, okay. Now, okay. Yeah, we were talking about last time because right, we were both in person and also on Zoom. We were talking about voluntarily adding things to the Amidah, voluntarily adding passages that one would deem appropriate. So here you have one of the very few, I would say, terse statements in the Shulchan Aruch, which is a congregation never prays a voluntary prayer. Period. On to the next, right? Well, meaning, and I think I mentioned this earlier about the story of the person who started to kind of improv a bunch of things that he wanted to say as the prayer leader, and then the rabbi there said, "Nah, you can't just start adding extra stuff to our prayers." And so I think that the distinction we make is that as an individual, if we're praying on our own or in our own silent prayers, if we wanted to add some things, that's okay. But when a congregation is when it's communal prayer, we can't go off script, if you will. We can't, and we can't just start making stuff up. As the prayer leader can't just start making changing the words to things. Now, there was one time I have to acknowledge that I was leading a service, a weekday. I think it was a Sunday morning service in a location where it was snowing rather heavily, and we got to the line in the Amidah that we say half the year, that is Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGashem, which means, God causes the wind to blow and the rain to fall. Right. And I couldn't help myself. And so instead I said, Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaSheleg, which means God causes the wind to blow and the snow to fall. And I don't think people got mad. I mean, there were certainly some giggles. There was certainly some laughter from that. But I don't know whether anybody was like, he shouldn't have done that. If people were saying that, it didn't come back to me. But I guess I couldn't help myself to do that. But in general, you're really not supposed to do that.
So like the prayer for the captives doesn't count because it's not really part of the.
Right. It's not, because really what we're talking about is the Amidah.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So outside of the Amidah, there are things we can, sort of throw in. And what I'd also say is that, I mean, presumably, I know it has Heskamuna, like certainly times when there isn't a rabbi present, that sometimes I know the prayer leader has kind of had discretion about whether they, when or if they add some of these readings, like prayer for the country, prayer for Israel, prayer for peace, prayer for I don't know what else. I mean, like, any number of things. Um, there's actually, I should mention this. Um, there's a prayer in something called, it's not Likrat Shabbat. It's Sidur Chadash. Sidur Chadash is a prayer book that some conservative synagogues have used. It's, I think, independently published. I actually don't really like, it's not an official, movement prayer book, but they have uh, a a reading that can be done responsively, maybe not, but it's meant to basically put all the um basically put sort of roll all these different readings into one. In other words, if you're doing the prayer for the country, prayer for Israel, prayer for peace, prayer for the safety of the soldiers, prayer for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This one is basically, it's called the blessings we seek, and it essentially, it's we add it's like there's like two lines for every one of these general ideas, and that way we're not doing 1,000 different English readings. We're basically putting all the stuff into one. And when I was working in Buffalo, I introduced that prayer and I said, listen, instead of having a gazillion different English readings, let's have this one. And when and if we have other causes to mention, we can always add something to this, right? So we did something like this where we began to like do a prayer. I don't know if any synagogue that you know of did this. Like we were doing a prayer for Ukraine. This was upon the when Russia invaded Ukraine a few years ago, and we did a separate prayer for Ukraine, and people began to say, gosh, are we doing a whole thing about Ukraine? Well, let's instead put like two lines into the blessings we seek about Ukraine, and that way we're at least we're talking about it,
When when Soviet Shuri wasn't allowed to leave and was being harassed in Russia, we used to do a prayer in Pittsburgh for Russian Shuri.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And and the idea is that like it's okay to pray for current or for things that are happening, that are like very contemporary and of sort of urgent need. It's okay to do that. It's just, I feel like as a community, it's important to just kind of figure out, all right, well, how much time are we taking for that? I mean, um, I've look, this coming, I know maybe it feels like it's a little early to look ahead at next year's Rosh Hashanah, but it occurs to me that Erev Rosh Hashanah, in this coming one in 2026, the Erev Rosh Hashanah will fall on September 11th, on the 25th anniversary of the attacks. I'm going to say something. I mean, look, there's going to be some kind of ritual, like there'll be something, some recognition. It's not going to be the dominant part of the service. I mean, the dominant part of the service should be Rosh Hashanah, but for me not to even mention or recognize it, I think would be a dereliction of responsibility to me. So anyway, so we're really talking about the Amidah in terms of voluntary prayer. Now, it says, one who wants to pray a voluntary prayer needs to know oneself to be quick and careful. and estimate in one's opinion that one will be able to concentrate in one's prayer from beginning to end. Meaning, at least from what I can tell, if you're going to throw in something, make it concise, right? Don't go on a long tangent so that you forget the the set prayers that you're supposed to do. But if one is not able to concentrate well, we would consider it like, and there's a quote from Isaiah, which is, "Why do I need all your sacrifices?" I'll get back to that in a second. And say, would that one could concentrate on the 3 fixed prayers a day before trying to do something extra? Okay, so what's this all about? So the Isaiah at a handful of times, I think the most famous example comes from the Haftarah that is read on Yom Kippur morning, in which Isaiah goes into a statement very similar to this. Why do I need all your sacrifices? Meaning, what God is communicating to in this idea is, hey, fasting and sacrifices and ritual, all that's very nice, but if you're not pairing that with appropriate action, then it's kind of an empty gesture, right? That Haftorah talks all about, like, your fasting is, if you're fasting, great, but if you're fasting but not feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, et cetera, then what are you doing? So I find it interesting that Joseph Caro would kind of bring this into the conversation. In other words, like, hey, if you're not concentrating, and if you're going on this sort of, if you're kind of doing this long tangent and what have you, and kind of going off on some sort of thing, you're kind of missing the point. You're kind of losing the thread here, and then they have, would that one could concentrate on the 3 fixed prayers of a day before trying to do something extra. In other words, if you're going to be really passionate about this tangent, well, better that you get really, really good at the set prayers before you start trailing off into a different thing. Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, you were talking about doing not just to pray, but also to actually do something with the ideas of the prayers. And it reminds me of the different meanings of Avodah. On the one hand, it's worship service, but on the other hand, it's work. And it can be work for fellow human beings, so that prayer translates into action for fellow human beings.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, prayer is supposed to be sort of the gateway to action. It's the point of prayer is not to just get really, really, really great at prayer itself. At least that's not the whole of it. In other words, like, don't forget the stuff that really matters is the overall idea, which I think is a nice reminder. And look, we can all do this to a certain extent, right? I mean, we're we can be pretty good at, like every time uh, it's like there are times where where I say to myself, gosh, I can, if you asked me to name the winners of the World Series from 1903 until today, 1903 was when the first World Series is, I could probably name about 90% of them. And every once in a while, like somebody will say something like, wow, wouldn't it be nice if you could apply that memory to the Talmud? Like something that matters more. It's like, well, okay, that's true. And again, it's okay to have, to enjoy sort of side quests, if you will, and to enjoy, the things that are not necessarily the most meaningful, but don't forget the things that are also most meaningful. So I found that very relatable. Okay. Here we have, I guess they got a lot of things to say about this one, about this topic. One who did not pray due to a mistake or an extenuating circumstance or on purpose, containing 12 different sections. Yikes. Okay, so they got a lot to say about this. But I think there's going to be some useful stuff in here. All right, so the first part is, if one erred or was first forced by circumstance and did not pray the morning prayer, one should pray the afternoon prayer twice. The first is the afternoon prayer, and the second as a makeup. In other words, you say the Mincha Amidah 2 times. One is saying it at, like the actual Mincha prayer, doing it at the right time. And then the other one is, okay, this is my makeup. If one inverted the order, one has not fulfilled one obligation in prayer for the prayer which is a makeup, and one needs to go back and pray it again. And the same law applies in every case in which one must pray a makeup prayer. Now, the one thing I would say about this is that in terms of content, the Mincha Amidah, the Amidah for the afternoon, a weekday afternoon, is usually just about identical to the Amidah for a typical morning. So on one hand, it might feel a little like, okay, well, which one's the difference? I would say on a Shabbat or a holiday, the differences between the morning Amidah and the afternoon Amidah are rather vast. So there, it's very easy to determine which one is which. On a weekday, this is a little, it can be a little more difficult. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there. In other words, but it goes back to this idea that in terms of fulfilling the mitzvah, in terms of fulfilling the obligation to pray, our first responsibility is to pray whatever needs to be prayed at the correct time. You take care of that first. And then if you're able to do any kind of makeup work, if you will, you do that afterwards. Now, what's not clear here is whether, like, there is, I think, a little bit of there is a bit of vagueness about whether they're talking about when they talk about praying, whether they're talking about just the Amidah or an entire service. The Mincha service in full, if you were going at a relatively leisurely rate, you can still get it done in about 15 minutes. And that's at a leisurely rate, right? If you're going a little faster, you can make it even faster than that. Shacharit, the morning service, that's a bit longer because we have a lot more things in the service. So there is a bit of vagueness about when if we're making up the recitation of a service, are we talking about the entire service, or are we simply talking about praying the Amidah? I don't think that's actually answered here. I do feel a little bit, I guess, reluctant to talk about when you get quote unquote credit for doing things. Do we really think that there is somebody that there's somebody up in the sky making check marks for when we say different services, and whether we're saying them on time and whether we're saying them in full? Theologically, if that helps, if thinking that helps motivate you to pray and to pray at the appropriate time, that's great. Do we really think that somebody's up there doing that? I don't know. I have my doubts. But I think an appropriate way to think of it is at the very least to make it aspirational. At the very least to think that we're supposed to. I remember actually having a conversation. I don't know, wasn't a conversation, this was actually a class in which in rabbinical school, one of my teachers said, and I think I've mentioned this before here in this space, in which they'll say, which she said, can I say with absolute certainty that I have put on tefillin and prayed the morning service every single day of my life since I became bar mitzvah? Can I say that? No, I can't. Have there been days I've missed? Yes, there have been days I've missed. But to feel obligated means that I know I'm supposed to.
Yeah, and to make the effort, right?
Right.
We're not supposed to. We don't have to complete the task, but we are, enjoying to try it.
Exactly. And so that's really the key to the key to this is that at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I didn't say, it's like, oh gosh, it's too late. I didn't do this. What am I going to do? What's going to happen to me? Well, nothing's going to happen to you. I don't think, on a theological basis, I don't think anything's going to happen to you. The idea is now just to try to, okay, but like going forward, that's what we should be doing. So, okay. Now, but what I would say is good here, and I'm not trying to say that this conversation here that the Shulchan Aruch is going through is a problem. I don't think it is. At least to me, it's not a problem, because it gives you at least a pathway to make things up. In other words, sort of on one hand, no, nothing terrible is going to happen to you if you miss it. But then again, but you shouldn't also have the attitude of, oh, well, I missed it once, so now I can't do it I don't have a perfect record with it, so what's the point? I never have to do it again. We shouldn't be saying that either. So this gives you a pathway to kind of get you back on track. So this next part is, If one erred and did not pray the afternoon prayer, one should pray the evening prayer twice. The first is for the evening prayer, and the second is for the makeup. If one erred and did not pray the evening prayer, one should pray the morning prayer, like the next morning, twice, the first for the morning prayer and the second as a makeup. Then, after one says Yotzer, the blessings of the recitation of the Shema in the morning prayer, and the 18 blessings, the Amidah, one should say Ashrei, and then afterwards pray the 18 blessings for the makeup evening prayer. So I know these are a lot of specifics, but what it's trying to say is that essentially you go through, like in a morning service, you go through the Shema and its blessings, the morning Amidah, and then you say Ashrei, which is mainly Psalm 145 and one of the most popular prayers. You get through those sort of quote unquote bare minimum requirements of the morning service, and then you go into the evening. Then you go into the evening service. Then you go into the evening Amidah. So anyway, so like I said, this is giving you a pathway of how to do this. Then, all right, here we have the gloss. And similarly, when one prays the evening prayer twice because one did not pray the afternoon prayer, one should say Ashrei between one prayer and the other prayer. So, in other words, if you are in a position where you're saying the Amidah twice in a row, once for the proper time of day, and then the second time to make up for the previous time of day that you missed, you have to have a palate cleanser, if you will. You have to do something in between so that you're not simply saying the Amidah once, once immediately after the next. Because then that feels really redundant. Like you need to have some sort of break in between. Is everybody following this?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that I'm explaining it okay, because I recognize there's a lot going on here.
I think for people who are not that familiar with prayers yet, it may be a little hard to envision this without seeing it in front of them. So.
Sure. And yeah, and I would say that,
Over here?
maybe at some point I could just sort of walk through a Siddur and I could, show all this, which I guess is a little harder to do on Zoom. But I guess the point in all this is what I just said about if you are going straight from the thing you're supposed to do to at the right time to the thing you are making up for missing the previous time, you have something in between. You say some other prayer in between so that you're not just jumping one to the next.
I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm familiar enough with the prayers to know what's going on here, but
yeah,
it all seems a little silly to me.
Okay. Right.
And somebody made up these rules at some point, and seriously? I mean, I don't know. It just seems kind of bad. But maybe that's just because I'm not terribly super observant. I don't know.
No. And by the way, that's I want to validate that. I mean, that is, I think it's, first of all, a reasonable reaction, and second of all, understandable that like, wow, how seriously are we taking this, right? How seriously do we need to take this, especially if, like I indicated, especially if we don't think that there's somebody up in heaven, checking everything off, right? Um, so I guess one comparison I would make, and it's not the greatest comparison, I acknowledge, but like, let's say it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you were so wrapped up in the day that you forgot to eat lunch. Right? You realize at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, oh my gosh, I forgot to eat lunch.
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
Okay. Some people, might not forget, but I know people where that does happen, right? So do you eat a double meal for dinner? Probably not.
I would have a snack and then eat dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'd have right, you'd have a little something, and then you kind of give yourself then you'd give a little break, and then you'd have dinner or something like that, right? In other words,
Do that frequently, yeah.
yeah, you wouldn't. It's like, okay, I'm gonna eat twice the amount now. Probably not. Now, granted, I mean, what one's digestive system can take is not necessarily similar to the question of, like, the amount of prayer one needs to say.
It just doesn't seem necessary to me, I guess. I mean, if
Janet,
Right,
I'm
but-
glad you
you
said
said
that.
it
I
and you
thought that
really
was-
mean it, just because you didn't say it earlier, you have to say it again. I mean, it just seems sort of, I don't know. It just seems like something that one of my cousin's rabbis would dream up and make a rule for everybody, but
Sure.
I don't
What
know.
you're saying, Janet, makes sense to me. I thought, well, that's just me. That's another rule I'm not going by. That's why I guess I'm reformed, not orthodox or conservative, but I'm glad that you said that. I was just thinking it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not reformed,
Yeah.
I'm not orthodox. I don't know,
Yeah, yeah, and
And I get it. I mean, I do get it, but it does seem kind of arbitrary to me.
sure, and yeah, and that's fair. I mean, because and not I'm not and not necessarily to make a sort of a larger point about it, but like, um, there is an extent to which the laws that most of these laws that we're speaking of are, to an extent, arbitrary, right?
They're
Like
not really
how,
laws, they're things rabbis decided over the centuries, right?
right, and so and it's totally fine to say, okay, oh well, this law makes sense, and then but this law, I don't know what they were thinking. Um, it's totally fair.
Doesn't matter.
I guess one thing I might suggest is that, um, what we're trying to do is, what we're trying to do in general when it comes to prayer is to mimic, if you will, the sacrificial system, right? We are still kind of basing it on that
Yeah, I
because,
forgot about that. Yeah.
yeah. And so, in other words, like, let's say for whatever reason, back in the times of the sacrifices,
Right.
the Kohanim, were prevented from offering a sacrifice, right? They slept late, they forgot, or there was an emergency, or whatever it was in the temple. Who knows, right? Um, there would still be this feeling of, oh well, all right, we didn't get a chance to say to offer the morning sacrifice. Let's offer the afternoon sacrifice first, and then let's go back and do the morning sacrifice, but let's have a little break in between, just so that it's clear that.
I get
So
that.
yeah, so I think that's so.
That's where it comes from. Right.
I think that's fair to say, right? I mean, now, to argue that you have to do this the same way, that's arbitrary, that's perfectly fair argument. But I think that's where they're getting it from.
Well, it's good to know where, I mean, it makes more sense when you put it that way, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So this statement that one can complete or make up the Amidah prayer that one missed applies specifically during the time of the next Amidah prayer, but when it is not the time of that next Amidah prayer, one may not. In other words, there's a statute of limitations. So, in other words, it wouldn't make sense to say like, okay, it's let's say you're praying the Amidah, like you're saying the afternoon service this afternoon on the December 24th. To say, okay, well, I forgot to pray the evening service on December 12th, so here's my makeup for that. Like at a certain point, it gets silly, right? It gets silly to just sort of make, there's a statute of limitations. In other words, if you forgot the most recent service you were supposed to say, fine. You can make that up, but then if you're past it, then if you go past that, then it gets silly. So that's, and I think, which I think makes sense, that you're not just gonna you're not just gonna make up here's the time I forgot to say Murray 5 years ago. No, like at a certain point it's done. Okay. Then the next part, there are no makeup prayers other than the immediately adjoining prayer alone, so that if one erred and did not pray the morning prayer and also the afternoon prayer, one only prays the evening prayer twice, with the latter prayer as a makeup for the afternoon prayer, but the morning prayer there is no makeup, and the same goes for all the rest of the prayers. Okay, that's a lot of stuff that basically makes the same point I just made. Essentially, like,
Yeah. It's the statute of limitations you were talking about.
right. It's like, okay, yeah, like, it kind of relates a little bit to, we just had we had the lovely opportunity to celebrate a bat mitzvah this past Saturday at the synagogue. And so it reminds me of something I would say to, anytime I would tutor a bar mitzvah kid, which is that, when you're chanting the Haftarah, when you're, chanting that prophetic reading, which is like, that's like, and obviously, look, I'm not trying to reduce this to terms of performing or anything like that. But like, I often, but I have, referred to it as like, it's the big solo, right? I mean, it's where, people are, they're getting up there and there aren't other people interacting. It's like, it's just you up there and you're, chanting the blessings in the text, right? It's, kind of this moment. And unlike the Torah reading, when you have people standing there, ensuring that you're saying the words correctly, the Haftarah, that isn't the case, right? You're not doing that during the Haftarah. So, what I tell students is that, look, if you make a mistake, if you can correct it immediately, yes, please do that. If you realize it a little bit later, there's no point in going back. At a certain point, you just got to keep it moving. Not just for the congregation's sake, but also like, you get to verse 12 and you're like, oh, I made a mistake in verse 9. I got to go back to that. No. Like, be reasonable with yourself. Be fair, be gentle with yourself. I really feel that way. Be gentle with yourself when it comes to that. Like, okay, so if you can make an immediate correction, yes.
When I learned the Haftarah, my cantor said, whatever you do, don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you make a mistake, don't stop. Just keep going.
Sure.
Because
sure.
the interruption is worse than making the mistake in a way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I and again, not trying to make this all about performance, because obviously there's more to it than that. But I was taught that, like, all right, if you're back in the back in my youngest days when I took piano lessons, right, when I have a little piano recital, it's like, right, if you make a mistake, just keep going through, or correct it immediately, and then move on, as opposed to like stopping what you're doing and then saying, oh shoot, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, let me go back,
No, you never do that. No.
right,
I'm more
right.
familiar with that than I am with praying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So similar thing. Okay. Even though there are no makeup prayers other than for the prayer immediately adjoining that prayer, and other prayers that one missed do not have a makeup, if one wants to pray that one, the one that cannot be made up anymore, as a voluntary prayer, and one will innovate something new into it, one is allowed to, and it is proper to do so. Okay, so this is a caveat, I guess, that I wasn't expecting, but okay. I mean, where it's like, all right, well, it was too late for me to do that, for me to actually make it up, but I'm gonna, throw in something that makes it a little unique. They have an allowance for that. I'm not sure why, but I guess that was something that they were willing to allow. Now, if the whole day passed and one did not pray the additional prayer, meaning Musaf, the Musaf service, which we do on Shabbat, on festivals, on Rosh Chodesh, there is no makeup for it. Now, why would they talk about the whole day? It's actually because the Musaf service is a prayer in which there is no set time for it. This is one reason why the Musaf service is allowed to be so long on the high holidays, especially. This is one reason why it's allowed, because there's no prescribed time for it. So if you're not beginning it until, 11:30 in the morning, noon, 12:30, 1 p.m., depending on what kind of congregation you go to, it's not a problem. You can say the Musaf service pretty much any time during the day.
I've
That's
noticed,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. No, I just say I noticed since we came here, people leave before Musaf, which the first Rosh Hashanah I was here was 2022. It was at the Lighthouse because, COVID and the wall was caving in. And
Sure.
we thought so many people left. We were sitting there thinking, wait, is the service over? They don't do Musaf here? And then it started again. But I don't honestly think it's because people are praying Musaf later. I think they're just leaving. I had just never experienced that before.
It's because lunch costs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then they're not staying for Kiddush either. I don't know.
So there, I mean, yeah, so it's something that I would say, I feel that it's sort of been that way for a while. Maybe it's more widespread than it used to be. That I mean, I remember when I started, running services on the high holidays. That essentially what I was told is you got to get your sermon in. At least you got to start it before noon. At least you got to start it before noon. I mean, I try to start, I try to make sure it's over before noon, but anyway, like, at least you got to start it before noon, because in general, when people go to high holiday services, they generally do want to hear the sermon. But then after that, all bets are off in terms of how long people are going to stick around. One strategy that I found very interesting, this was this was actually the high holidays just before I started to work for Hesed Emunah. I had I had like a sort of like a temporary fill-in position helping out a synagogue um, in Potomac, Maryland, and uh, and the rabbi there pushed his like the sermon took place. You did not, nobody ever knew when the sermon was going to take place, and he pushed it till as long as late in the service as he possibly could, because he wanted people to stay as long as they possibly could. So he basically just said, I'm going to do my service, or I'm going to do my sermon, just about at the end of the service, so that people would stick around. Which I think people only have a certain amount of tolerance for, but he utilized that to his advantage, I guess. So it's an interesting strategy. I'd never seen that before. But yeah, but that's also a reason why I try to make it so that, we try to make sure to finish at least Rosh Hashanah services by 1 p.m. Because, it's like, all right, well, at least you can get the whole service in, and it's not going to be crazy late for lunch. Yom Kippur, you don't have that pressure because, well, if you're having lunch, there must be, there are extenuating circumstances why you're having lunch. I mean, I'm not trying to judge people on their fasting habits, but to say, oh shoot, I got to leave because I've got lunch, doesn't really work. Okay. Now, if it was on purpose and one did not pray an Amidah, there is no makeup for it, right? If you were like purposefully not doing it, then, you're out of luck, even at the prayer that is immediately adjoining it. And if one wanted, one may pray it as a voluntary prayer, and one does need an innovation of something new in it if one prayed it at the prayer time immediately adjoining it. In other words, don't sit here saying that you can just be like, yeah, I can skip it because I can always make it up. Don't have that attitude. Don't, in other words, like, obviously all of this is taken on trust here, but like, the assumption is if you've missed reciting a prayer at the proper time, you've got extenuating circumstances. It's not just because you didn't feel like it. Okay. Let's see. Let me see. I think let's see. Maybe we'll try one more of these before we finish for the day. Okay. One who did not pray the Amidah while there was still enough time to pray, because one supposed that the time would still remain for one after one finished whatever thing one was involved in, and between one thing and another the time passed. And similarly, one who was troubled with monetary needs so that one would not incur a loss, and because of that one lost one's ability to pray. And similarly, someone who is drunk and did not pray. All of these are considered people with extenuating circumstances, and they do have an opportunity, not a pan opportunity, that's probably a typo. They do have an opportunity for a makeup. From the outset, one should not let the prayer time pass because of monetary loss. In other words, ideally, one is not going to worry about there being a financial cost to it. So they're essentially trying to say, here is what we think are extenuating circumstances. One is that you thought you didn't have it, you were involved in something and you thought you didn't have enough time, and it turns out you did have time. Another one is you were wrapped up in something having to do with your ability to bring in money and there was no way that thing could wait. Those are extenuating circumstances. I find it curious that they say that drunkenness is an acceptable extenuating circumstance. I'm not trying to make a judgment. I'm just trying to say that seems rather charitable to me. That if you were too drunk to pray, okay, that's an acceptable excuse. I don't know how much I like that, but okay. So anyway, so those are we'll talk about other delays and extenuating circumstances when we resume this in a couple of weeks. But I think a helpful discussion on sort of the topic of obligation and whether we're honest with ourselves about what is acceptable reasons to delay something and what isn't. So I will, I am still doing Judaism 101 this Sunday, so please feel free to join me for that. But other than that, when it comes to this and other adult education, I will see you next year. So I hope everybody is well and enjoy hopefully some quiet days at the conclusion of 2025.
Yeah, have a great break. So
thank you.
Thank you for everything. So.
Certainly.
Okay.
All right.
Happy New Year, Janet and Richard and Will.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
Happy New
I'll
Year.
be in Israel for most of January,
Bye.
so I'll be watching you on YouTube.
Sounds good. Safe trips.